Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Boeing. Welcome to Cashin. Our Cashin crew this week: Wayne Rogers, Jonathan Honig, Michelle Fields, and Jessica Ehrlich. Welcome, everybody. 298 innocent people dead from the plane attack, and now this.
We have new evidence that the Russians intend to deliver heavier and more powerful multiple rocket launchers to the separatist forces in Ukraine, and have evidence that Russia is firing artillery from within Russia to attack Ukrainian military positions.
So, Michelle, are they serious? Where are the serious sanctions? How many more have to die? President Obama, he'll deliver a strongly worded tweet. How about some strong actions?
Yeah, this president gives off the impression of these red lines, but as soon as someone crosses it, he doesn't do anything about it. Obama loves being president, but he doesn't love the work that comes with being president. You can't just wag your finger and give these empty threats. You need to actually do something. What we ought to be doing is speeding up our natural oil and gas exports, because if we can reduce other countries' dependence on Russia for oil, well, we can reduce Russia's wealth and we can reduce their influence. You
know what, John? Michelle is absolutely right. That's where you really hit Russia hard with the sanctions in the oil sector. Are you for sanctions?
Eric, I think limited sanctions at this point will be effective only if they come with the moral condemnation. I mean, Putin is a thug. He's a tyrant. He's bringing Russia back to the Soviet era, although unlike the Soviet era, they're not yet a military threat to this country. So again, what's needed is loud moral condemnation. I mean, the president has the ultimate bully pulpit. And as you pointed out, what is his response? A tweet. Think back to what Ronald Reagan did after the Soviets shot down an unarmed jet, Korean jet in 1983. His speech, many people say, changed the tide of the Cold War. That's what's needed from this president.
So, Jessica, why aren't there any serious sanctions? The Obama administration put some sanctions on there, frankly, feckless. I think they targeted a few Russian billionaires. What about a serious sanction to the Russian economy and the Russian people?
I'm actually supportive of having more serious sanctions like we do with Iran. I mean, this is a very important tool that we have in our arsenal in terms of international policy. But I think it also needs to be on a global level. The EU needs to step up and be involved as well, because it's one thing.
They won't. They're worried about their oil sector. They're worried about getting oil. Let me just fact check you a little bit here. The sanctions we put on Iran, President Obama lifted those.
Well, not all of them.
Well, the vast majority of them. He basically said, we're going to let you do your thing. We're going to lift our sanctions. Wayne, what about it? What do we do here? I'm in favor of absolutely going after these guys in the oil sector. What about you?
Well, I think you're right, Eric, but the problem is this. There are 28 members of the European Commission. You cannot get 28 people to agree to sanctions. One sanction, you can't get three of them, three countries to agree to it. The English have a vested interest in what happens in the banking system. The Germans get 40% of their gas from Russia. You've got people who are at odds with each other within the Commission, and as a consequence, it's difficult. You have to be discreet about these things and make them very pinpointed. I don't know what Obama can do, in other words, without the cooperation of the Europeans. So I don't know how he can help himself.
A leader has to get the cooperation of the other people. That's part of his job, okay? He can't just let Putin get away with murder.
Oh, that's easy to say. That's easy for you to say. You don't know what you're talking about. You can say that all day long. Have you seen 28 nations agree on anything? No. So don't tell me that.
Well, maybe hold on, guys. Hold on, John, go ahead. I want to get back to that in 1 second, but go ahead, John.
Well, that's a place maybe Obama could start. Demand that, for example, Russia be kicked out of the United Nations, or threaten to leave ourselves, or just leave ourselves as a result. But I think to your point, to Jessica, Eric, about lifting the sanctions on Iran, what good are the sanctions if we don't have the moral condemnation that accompanies it? And I tell you, Russia's stock and bond markets have already been hit, even at this point. So again, I think the moral condemnation, and people should know when they deal with Russia, they're dealing with a thug and their money is likely to be
Wayne, here's the thing.
Or gone.
Here's the thing, Wayne, and I'm going to agree with Michelle on this one. We could step up. We could have a leader who says, you know what, even if the EU doesn't get involved, we don't think it's right. You kill 300 innocent people. You're knocking down planes in Ukraine right now. President Putin has no regard for the international community or no regard for life. Isn't it our moral obligation at least to step up and say, enough is enough, not necessarily with troops, but certainly with sanctions?
Well, but Eric, I think you can talk all day long about that, and he can be morally superior and all of that kind of stuff, but it's not going to be effective unless you back it up with force. In other words, Putin is a guy who understands one thing: power. That's what he's using. And if we don't use it in some way in return, then we're wasting our time. Yes,
but the problem is, Wayne, is that we're not doing
Wayne?
anything right now. We're not doing anything right now. Putin is in our backyard. He's building a spy base in Cuba. What are we doing? We're just standing around and doing nothing. He is getting away with murder. These separatists are funded. They're trained by Putin. There needs to be ramifications.
No,
yes,
John,
there need to be consequences.
John, I'm not going to go as far as military force. I'm saying economic sanctions work. They worked in Iran. They'll work in Russia, where they're 50% of their GDP is reliant on the oil industry. You know what? You start playing with the price of a barrel of oil, bringing it down, drill our own. Guess what? That hurts them badly.
But we need to start looking at it on a major global level. I think that's very important going forward, because what we're seeing is sort of the beginning of what we had previously with the Putin wants to have the reunification of the USSR. We need to make sure that we've got serious sanctions that are going to cripple them, not let that happen going forward, so that they don't join together with China, who's also their neighbor.
Jessica,
and
that's
get into
all well and fine. Listen, but the problem is President Obama goes the other way. He's worried about slapping sanctions. He's worried about looking like the guy who's tough on other countries. Look, can we pull up the President Obama?
After my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah, I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir.
John, that's not a tough leader. He's basically saying, after the next election, I'll have more flexibility. More flexibility? You need more strength. You need more arm strength.
Well, and you need to represent America, Eric, and that's why I think, Wayne and Michelle say, well, talk doesn't make a difference. I think when it comes from a president of the United States, talks makes a hell of a lot of difference. His rhetoric, which is always, celebrated by the press and by many others, could be tremendously effective if he actually communicated American-centric ideas. And I think a more loud denunciation would not only hurt Russia's stock market, but ultimately hurt people who don't want to deal with them and their economy as well.
Hold on,
if you don't have the moral combination,
wrap it up,
sanctions
Wayne.
mean nothing.
Wayne, I need you to wrap it up right now.
I think, Eric, I think you're exactly right. You've got to be tough about it, though. I mean, I don't think you can have empty rhetoric. You can't just make a threat about it and not follow through. The idea of sanctions on oil is a great idea, but it has to be tough, it has to be meaningful, and it has to be definitive.
All right. That was the definitive end of that segment. I love that. We're going to have to leave it right there. But you can continue this conversation right now on Twitter. Hashtag Cashin. Trending on Twitter 26 weeks in a row. And last week, we hit a new Twitter record. Tens of thousands tweeted. And get this, our Twitter reach is approaching 9 digits. Do the math. It's simply amazing. Marianne Van tweeted, while Russian President Putin flexes his global muscle, President O flexes his ego. And I just tweeted, what's wrong with this picture? Hashtag Cashin. If you agree with me, go to Twitter and retweet that right now. Coming up, the fundraiser in chief is at it again as problems intensify in America and around the globe. The president goes grabbing donation dollars on the left coast. Can you say out of touch much?